Rochester, New York, 1975. Inside Eastman Kodak, the company whose films sat in nearly every camera on Earth, a junior engineer receives an assignment so vague it sounds like a brush-off. Build a camera with no film. He spends a year scavenging spare parts. A sensor meant for video, a converter, a cassette deck. What he builds works. It captures an image as numbers, not chemistry. Then he carries it upstairs to the men who run a billion-dollar film empire. Their verdict will decide the future of photography. And Kodak will choose to lock its own future in a drawer. If you've ever wondered how the modern world quietly buried the inventions that built it, subscribe, because the story of the camera Kodak ordered hidden is only beginning. In 1975, Eastman Kodak was not merely a company. It was the AIR photography, breathed. Founded in 1888, the firm had spent nearly a century turning light into chemistry, and chemistry into money. By the mid-1970s, it controlled roughly 90% of film sales in the United States and 85% of camera sales. Every wedding, every birthday, every vacation snapshot passed through a yellow box stamped with its name. Kodak did not sell cameras to make money. It sold cameras to sell film. The film was the empire. The camera was just the doorway. This was the iron logic of the place. Chemistry meant revenue. Every photograph demanded a strip of coated celluloid, a trip to a developer, a fee, a print. The whole machinery of the corporation existed to keep that cycle spinning. Nobody inside the yellow walls imagined a photograph that left no residue, burned no silver, required no developing. Why would they? The residue was the business. Into this empire walked Stephen Sasson. 24 years old, an electrical engineer fresh from Rensselaer, a junior man in the apparatus division, the kind of employee handed problems nobody senior wanted. In late 1974, his supervisor gave him an assignment so vague it bordered on a dismissal. Find out whether a new chip called a charge-coupled device might be useful for imaging. No real budget, no deadline, no expectation. It was a side task, a curiosity, a question asked into the dark. The charge-coupled device was the seed of everything. Invented at Bell Labs a few years earlier, the CDD was a small electronic chip that turned light into electrical charge. Point light at it, and each tiny cell answered with a voltage. It was built for video, for memory, for laboratory measurement. Nobody had wrapped a still camera around it. Sasson read the specifications and saw what his employer had not asked him to see. If light could become charge, and charge could become numbers, then a photograph could become data. Pure data. No film at all. This was the contradiction Kodak never noticed it was funding. The company that lived on chemistry had quietly paid a young engineer to replace chemistry with electronics. Film versus data. Silver versus silicon. The two ideas could not share a future, and only one man in the building seemed to understand that yet. Sasson had no blueprint. Nothing like this existed to copy. So he built it the way a scavenger builds a shelter, from whatever lay within reach. He pulled a lens from a used Super 8 movie camera. He wired in a Fairchild CCD measuring 100 pixels by 100, a tenth of a single megapixel. He needed to convert the sensor's analog whisper into digital values, so he assembled an analog-to-digital converter from spare parts. He needed somewhere to store the result, and magnetic tape was the only medium cheap and dense enough. So he bolted on a portable cassette deck, the kind teenagers use to tape songs off the radio. The result was not elegant. It weighed 8 pounds. It was the size of a toaster and looked like a creature stitched from a junk drawer. Circuit boards for ribs, ribbon cable for veins, held together with more hope than engineering. No one would call it a camera. Every part inside it had been born for some other purpose, and none of them had ever worked together before. But inside that ungainly box, light was about to stop being a chemical event and start becoming a string of numbers. By December of 1975, the machine was ready for its first real test. Sasson aimed it at a lab technician named Joy Marshall, standing in the hard basement light. He pressed the shutter. Inside, the CCD drank the light and answered in voltages. The converter translated those voltages into digital values. The cassette deck spooled, writing the image as numbers onto magnetic tape. The capture took a fraction of a second. The playback would take 23. Then came the moment of truth. To see the photograph, Sasson had built a custom playback unit that read the tape and threw the image onto a television screen. The machine whirred. A face assembled itself line by line out of the dark, grainy, black and white, 100 pixels square. It was crude. It was unmistakable. It was the first digital photograph in human history. The technician studied her own image, said the hair had come out wrong, and walked away. She did not know she was standing inside the future. The numbers told the story in stark terms. One image, 23 seconds to display. A resolution so low a modern phone would dismiss it as noise. By every standard of 1975, it was a failure. And yet Sasson understood exactly what he was holding. This was not a worse camera. It was a different kind of camera entirely, one that would only get better, while film had already climbed as high as chemistry could carry it. In 1976, Sasson and his supervisor carried the prototype upstairs to show Kodak executives. The men who ran the film empire watched a photograph appear on a television without a single frame of celluloid. Their questions were not about wonder, they were about threat. Why would anyone want to look at pictures on a television? Who would give up prints? How many years until this was real? Sasson answered honestly, 15 to 20. The room heard a distant problem. It did not hear its own death. The verdict was simple. The technology was interesting, and the technology was dangerous. Kodak filed a patent in 1978, securing the invention on paper, then locked the idea in a drawer. The business logic was airtight, and the business logic was a trap. Film printed money. Digital printed nothing. To champion Sasson's box was to wage war on the company's own bloodstream. So they buried it. The prototype went into storage. The engineer was told, in effect, to keep quiet. The future waited in that drawer for 30 years. If you want to see how a buried invention claws its way back into the world, stay with this one, because what happened next is the part Kodak never planned for. The patent that protected Sasson's invention expired in 2007, and with it, Kodak's chance to own the revolution it had invented. By then, the world had gone digital, without them. Rivals with no film empire to protect raced ahead. Phones swallowed cameras whole. The yellow box that once meant photography itself began to vanish from shelves. The reckoning arrived in numbers, as it always does. In January 2012, Eastman Kodak filed for bankruptcy. The company that had owned 90% of an industry, the company that had invented the very technology that destroyed it, could not survive the future it chose to hide. The chemistry that built the empire could not save it from the silicon it had locked away. Stephen Sasson's recognition came late. In 2009, the president awarded him the National Medal of Technology and Innovation. The junior engineer with the pointless assignment had changed how every human being on Earth would remember their own life. Kodak did not miss the digital future. It invented it, held it in its hands, and chose to look away. The first digital photograph was a blurry face on a basement screen, and the men who saw it decided the world was not ready. The world was always ready. It was the empire that was afraid. We did not lose film the day someone built a better camera. We lost it the day a company decided its past was worth more than its future, and quietly closed the drawer.